Hi, all, and welcome to Horror in the Digital Age, English 119. Will be our welcome video, which will just kind of guide us through the class policies, the assignments that you're going to be completing, the readings that we're going to do, and I want to highlight exactly why we're going to study what we're studying and what value there is in looking at horror in the 21st century. Specifically, looking at one crazy, reclusive 20th century writer who was, heads up, a pretty bad human being, and what his work can tell us about ourselves. Because within the past 20 years or so, there has been a resurgence of using this writer's work. My main question is why. So hopefully we can explore that together. First things first, however, what you see in front of you is our course site page. This is where all the documents and all the readings, with the exceptions of the ones that I've outlined in the email that I sent to y'all, will be stored. Currently, it's a little unpopulated. That's fine. As the weeks go on, I will unlock all of the readings as we go. That way it doesn't look so cluttered for you. Right now, what I want you to focus in on is the class syllabus and policies and the class reading and assignment schedules. These two documents are kind of like the documents of our course. We're going to be following them to a T. The reading schedule is a little tight. This is a summer course, so we're kind of distilling a lot of information down in only 6 weeks. So I want to make sure that A, you have enough time to read foundational readings that we're going to be wrestling with, and B, that you can do it and still maintain your sanity. So hopefully the reading schedule has done that. So this welcome video, as I said, wants to start with the goals of the course. If you look at that first page of the syllabus, I really want you to focus in on that first goal. So here we have our nice little course description. I'm not going to read it verbatim here. That would take too much time. But it'll give you an idea of what we're looking at for major questions that are foundational for the course. What I want to focus in on here is our first major goal. I want you, by the end of this course, to be able to critically analyze and comfortably discuss multiple medias. So this is something that is increasingly valuable as we go forward outside of this class and into our everyday lives. So in this class, I've made it a point to not just look at fiction. We could have an entire summer session just on fiction or just on film around this one writer. I'm trying to give you as much as possible to play with. So I want you to be comfortable reading film. I want you to be comfortable reading audio dramas. And we'll talk about exactly what audio dramas are and how that 21st century kind of invention is harkening back to an earlier 20th century mode. And of course, I want you to wrestle with fiction and film, the more traditional ones that we usually go after in English courses. I want you to be able to hone your abilities of critically engaging with these texts that may be a little unfamiliar, that will challenge you as critics to not only look at words on a page and say, okay, this is what this text means, but also look at how that is presented, how that text is presented. So when in a video game, we're going to be looking at Resident Evil 7 first. In Resident Evil 7, why is it happening in Louisiana? This is more of a contextual thing, but why do you think the creators decided to put Resident Evil 7, a traditional narrative of zombies and biopower, in Louisiana, of all places, and around a family? So I want to kind of unpack these things, and just how, once we hit that base level of, okay, this is happening in Louisiana because XYZ, I want to be able to really focuses in on structural details and formal details that happen in that video game presentation that we can relate and support and bolster our claim of why does this happen in Louisiana. Again, we're going to go down the rabbit hole a bit on that, so I'm kind of excited for that week. First off, though, with that in mind, I want to kind of just go over my philosophy here of why we're doing what we're doing. So why Howard Phillips Lovecraft? He's as you'll find out relatively quickly, a terrible human being. He's a 20th century writer, or was, I should say. He's an Americanist who self-admittedly was born in the wrong century. He always loved the idea of the 18th century gentry and kind of romantic notions of an intellectual life. Alas, he was born in the 20th. I came to Lovecraft, I guess I'll start personally. I came to Lovecraft in high school when a friend threw me the first story that we're going to read, Dagon. And it was kind of corny, kind of cheesy, because all of the language was along the lines of, I cannot describe the horror that I'm feeling or seeing, dear reader. And that struck me, because at first the 18-year-old in me went, oh, that's lazy writing. As I began to think about it more, it's tapping into a deeper philosophical question, and our first lecture will cover that. The realm of a non-human-centric or anthrocentric worldview. So this is something that we're going to wrestle with. I didn't grasp it at first, and from 18 up until now, about 10 years later, I'm still wrestling with Lovecraft as a side project. The other thing that I noticed within the past few years is a critical resurgence around Lovecraft. He was recently canonized within the past 20 to 30 years, which means that he was added formally into this pantheon of writers that we can study, that we kind of put the stamp of approval on and say, yes, they do indeed make art. With that, there's a resurgence and surplus of writings on Lovecraft. There is one independent scholar, Joshi, who does a lot of work on Lovecraft, but beyond that idiosyncratic one critic off the hinge, there's also a lot of philosophical movements around this writer. For example, Graham Harman and the weird realists, as they call themselves, or object-orientated ontologists, have taken Lovecraft and held him up as a bastion of their philosophy. And we're going to dip into some of that later in the course. The other is literary criticism. Recently released, I think just last year, is a book by the name of The Age of Lovecraft. This is a collection of current scholars, top of their fields, wrestling with this writer. So some way, somehow, we've reached this apex of critical discussion around this singular writer. There's another level to this. So, friends that I have who have never read Lovecraft ever know his horror and style. If you look around and I say the words Cthulhu, you might think of South Park, where Cartman somehow summons Cthulhu to eliminate Justin Bieber, thankfully. You may also think of some tentacled beast. Again, that's fine. But how many of you have read The Call of Cthulhu? How many of you have heard the words Lovecraftian applied to something in an adjectival form? So this always fascinated me. The people know Lovecraft's style, they know his monsters, they know his mythos, but they don't necessarily have first-hand experience reading his texts. So this automatically drums up the critical question of why. What is it about his fiction that allows for such imitation, such echoing? Why do we talk about his mythos in our specific cultural moment? And hopefully together we can explore that. Which leads me to another reason of why we're looking at horror. Horror fiction always acts as a mirror to what is happening in our current moment. We look to horror and we look to what scares us because it's what scares us in that moment. This is why you can look at older horror movies and go, oh, well, why are nuclear-based zombies so frightening? Well, it was brought about by the focus on the Cold War, nuclear annihilation. And suddenly, the nuclear radiation could create these walking dead animals that would just murder us. Of course, that's a simplified view of the zombie. I don't mean to do disservice. But a good example of this is Edgar Allan Poe. And again, I'm a 19th century, so it's going to show here. Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Man of the Crowd, is all about one man trying to figure out the motivations of a stranger in this throng of people in this metropolis. He follows him, he stalks him, he's convinced that this old disheveled man is carrying a knife, but he never figures it out. He's left in this whirl of people going, well, I will never know him and I'll never know his motivations. It's kind of weak on the horror end now, right? In this world where we can walk down the street of strangers, a society of strangers, and not necessarily want to figure it out. But tapping into the cultural moment of rapid industrialization and a surge of immigrants and strangers walking into metropolitan areas, we kind of get a sense of why Edgar Allan Poe may have dipped into this image. Same thing with Brown. Those of you who have read Brockton Brown, Edgar Huntley. He takes the traditional 18th century Gothic castles and goes, no, I'm going to push that aside. And I want to make an American Gothic. Well, what does he use for the American Gothic images? The wilderness. So if you read Edgar Huntley, he takes the old school Gothic conventions of castles, lost documents, heredity plots, and drops them into an American landscape, literally. The main character, Edgar Huntley, dives through caves, battles with Native Americans, somehow kills an American jaguar in Pennsylvania. We won't go into the specifics. But he has made something horrific at the early part of the 19th century out of the American wilderness, which was all intent and purposes, feral, kind of scary. So we can see that horror is this reflexive way of trying to understand ourselves, our preoccupations. So if this is true, I want to see how not only horror, but the way it's conveyed, right? We focus in on a lot on the message of horror, but I want to go a little further and say the form of horror. So in video games, in music, in audio dramas, and in fiction, how does that medium help convey horror or what is terrifying for us in this cultural moment? So with those two filters, we're looking at H.P. Lovecraft because for whatever reason, and hopefully we can start putting our thumb on that, for whatever reason, he has become a weird 21st century cultural icon, and in the horror world, a cultural icon. And to horror, how do these two groups of fiction work to help us understand where we're at? So if you look at the last few questions, what can the life of a pulp-written writer who only came to critical attention with the last 30 years tell us about the increasing critical interest in modern horror? Does adaptation, the idea that we're echoing these works, does adaptation always work to emphasize the source material or challenge it? Are we somehow changing it? So a good example of this is there is a lot of racism in Lovecraft's work. He was a bigot. In our second week of class, we'll unpack some of these and read some of his really terrible stories. He has been resurrected, however, in a book called Lovecraft Country. This is about a civil rights era writer who is writing a Negro traveling guide. And that's what he calls it, the Negro traveling guide. And he's using Lovecraftian elements to get across his point about living in segregation. Well, this is interesting. This is totally challenging the original Lovecraft plot. So I'm interested in these tension moments. And finally, what does it mean to have a Lovecraftian feel to horror? I really want to interrogate that adjective. What does it mean to become or have a Lovecraftian feel? So I want to go over the broader strokes that we're going to make here. We will start the class with an overview of basic horror theory. Don't freak out. I'm not expecting you all to be masters of the entire theoretical concept of horror fiction, and movies. That would be impossible. What I do want is just to have some shared vocabulary. And this comes from our first set of readings from Eugene Thacker about the philosophical nature of horror. And that's where I want to start. From there, we'll move on and get a little more complex. But I just want to hit the ground running with some basic terminology, and I'll cover that more on Monday's lecture. From there, I want to start pairing H.P. Lovecraft's work with modern echoes or reinterpretations of his work. So I've tried to draw connections between the early 20th century writing with 21st century or late 20th century, in case of most of the films, reinterpretations of his work to feel and find out those tension points. So that's my goal. Broad scope of the course. By the end of it, I want us to be able to say that we are at the 20th century here. Look at us at Lovecraft fiction. How does it relate and pair with where we're at in the 21st century? Are we just mindlessly repeating, or are we trying to say something with a difference? Is there something about that 20th century writer's work that somehow encapsulates our nerves and feelings about living in a totally connected and amorphous social situation? Again, more on that later. So what I want to do now is quickly just walk through the syllabus with us. So I'm going to jump down to assignments. You will have 2 major paper assignments in this course. They're evenly spaced. Your first one will be due July 21st. That's a Saturday by midnight. All papers will be submitted via Turnitin. This is not to catch you on plagiarism. This is just to make grading and returning these things a little easier. The first paper is 3 to 5 pages. The second one is 6 to 8. So these are relatively short papers. More supplemental assignment pages will be coming out to you that will go into more detail. I can say now that that first paper is just a close reading of what we did. I want you to pick a text and apply a reading to it. Tell me what that text means and how you got there. That could be a book or, by that point, a film. So I'm interested to see where you go there. The longer paper is going to be making more of an argument about the course and what I just talked about and rambled about for a little while. This idea that we are using horror to understand ourselves. Well, this is your chance to really narrow in on a claim about that. That will be due Friday, August 10th. Same thing, uploaded on Turnitin, Friday, August 10th by midnight. It's good to note that all deadlines in this course happen at midnight Eastern Standard. So that's midnight on the day that assignment is due, just to get you going. The other 3 things that you're going to be doing in the course, you're going to have weekly postings. That's you responding to, in at least 700 words, you responding to the readings, the viewings that we do, the movies or video game streams, or the lecture. You post that up. You then have a second weekly response where you're responding to your peers' posts. This happens later in the week. And again, I'll kind of walk us through this in that first lecture. Also, just to make sure we're all on track, you're going to have weekly quizzes through CourseSite. These are not punitive. I'm not trying to throw curveballs at you to hurt your grades. What I'm trying to do is make sure that you are reading and synthesizing the material. The quizzes will be open book. I have no way of saying no. They will be short answer though, and it probably will only be 1 or 2 short answer questions. Nothing major. This will all be dipping from our reading or the lecture material that I cover for that week. There will also be a bonus assignment coming. This is to replace 2 failed quizzes or postings. So if you miss 2 postings, which are a huge part of your grade, as you can see in the grading and assessment outline, you'll have an opportunity to make those up with this bonus assignment. And more details will follow on that on a separate assignment sheet. So I want to quickly, because this is where it gets a little confusing, I want to jump down to the course schedule. So this is a tight course. We have roughly 6 weeks to get through 100 years of fiction. An insurmountable task. Maybe a non-Euclidean task. But I did my best to break down what a typical week will look like for you and on my end. So on my end, I will post a lecture about the readings every Monday morning. You will then have that week to look over that lecture, okay? You'll have that week to look over the readings. There are only a few things here that you have to do on specific days, okay? And I'll guide you through that. So, Wednesday. You don't have to do anything Monday or Tuesday except read and watch me talk at a camera. Should be pretty straightforward. Wednesday, your individual forum posts, those 700 word forum posts, are due by midnight. Thursday, I'm tasking you to take quizzes on the lecture on readings, and then Friday by midnight you have to respond to a peer's post. This is pretty straightforward. This gives you a lot of time. This gives you a lot of time to synthesize the material before you're actually posting and responding. You have essentially 2 days to read and watch the material, a third full day to kind of digest that and post by the end of the night. You then have a day to take a quiz and read what your peers wrote, and then respond. That's how it's always going to look. This is an idea of how it breaks down. You can see on our class schedule that I've gotten a little more directed about what we're doing on given days. That is sacrosanct. We are following that to a T. Barring unforeseen circumstances, those readings will not change. So please follow that reading schedule. This is just an outline or overview, of what we'll be doing on a given day of the week. If you need to contact me, email is probably the best bet for you. I check email like anyone else obsessively. I stop checking email around 9 p.m. This is because I am actually an 80-year-old man in a 28-year-old body, and I'm usually in bed by 9. I'm also a human being. So if you email me something at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm probably not going to get to it until 8 o'clock the following day. That's 8 o'clock a.m. I'll respond as quickly as humanly possible to you when I can, but just to let you know. And likewise, I'm not going to be sending you emails at 3 o'clock in the morning for class policies that will shift at 8 a.m. on that day. So I'm just asking for a little leeway there. I'll respond to emails as soon as I possibly can. Especially with an online course, I want to make sure that if any questions or concerns are brought up, that I'm responding in a timely manner. I have the goal of getting back to you within 24 hours, if not a little less than that, okay? The other thing, if you need to conference with me, if you want to talk, if you want to chat about the readings, if you have a paper idea but you're not quite sure how to do it, or if you want me to go over a rough draft or a section of a rough draft with you before submitting the paper, you can do that. Shoot me an email. We can schedule a time to Skype or go through Google Hangouts since we all have access to that, and really hammer out and have like an online writing session. Perfect. I will be happy to do that. Those are technically my office hours for this course. So if you do need an office hour, if you do need to chat with me, you can set that up via email. Okay? Other thing that I want to go before I wrap this up. I want to talk briefly about the content of this course, and I've kind of alluded to this already. This is, at its core, a horror course. Because of that, some of what we're going to be reading and watching is going to be disturbing. It is going to be kind of violent and gory at times. It should be, hopefully, a little scary. It should be uncomfortable. While there is a place for that discomfort when we're approaching critical discussions in texts, I don't want you to be blindsided by what we're covering in the more mature contact aspect of the course. Specifically, there are readings that contain gore. Some of the movies are gory. I will never just drop the movie on you and go, hey, have fun. I will give you a heads up about the gore that is happening in the movie. The clips that I show, I will also preface with, hey, by the way, this might be a little gory. There will be nudity and racial slurs in some of the fiction and games that we wrestle with. I will always give you a heads up, just like you get on TV. Parental discretion is advised. I will do the same thing here. However, if you feel that you are unable to continue reading or viewing any of the course materials, I want you to feel comfortable enough emailing me. Contact me and we'll find a suitable alternative. Whether that is a supplementary reading or a different assignment, I need you to do the work, but I don't want you to suffer through it. So if there is something that you physically and mentally cannot watch or read, please let me know. Finally, and I'll leave you this to peruse, accommodations for students with disabilities. For whatever reason, if you need extra time on quizzes, this is who you would follow. And I want to plug and have you look over a note on academic honesty and plagiarism. In short, as you are probably well aware, plagiarism is not tolerated in this course. If I find you cheating on papers or on quizzes or plagiarizing in any way, shape, or form, you will at least fail the course. It's kind of hard-nosed. I get it. I don't like being hard-nosed, but that's just how we maintain honesty. Okay, so I want to look at the 3 things that potentially you should buy. I said in my email that all of the readings will be scanned and posted. That is true, with the exception of 2 things. The radio drama and 1 film. Unfortunately, we were unable to get the rights for either of those. So if you look at my screen here, the Dark Adventure Radio Theater, The Call of Cthulhu, which we'll be reading or listening to at the end of the course or close to the end of the course. You don't have to buy the actual physical CD. If you just scroll down to individual MP3 files, that'll be fine. What I'm going to do, I own the CD because I am a relic of the 90s. I will scan in some of the prompts or some of the props that come with this so we can all kind of understand what's going on. The other thing that you're going to have to rent and or buy is In the Mouth of Madness. This is a film that will be available through Amazon for at least the extent of our course. So I recommend that you buy it just so you're not limited to that 48 hours to finish once you start, so you can really get clips for your posts. But if you just want to rent it, that's fine as well. Finally, one extra bit of material that you may want to pick up. This is the Luddite in me. You may want to pick up The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories, this Penguin edition. This is the one that I started with way back in high school. It's a really good edition. It has all of the readings, save, I believe, 1 that we're wrestling with. That's the Horror of Red Hook, and we'll understand why we don't have that in the Penguin edition. But this is worth picking up if you want a physical copy. Again, all of these readings are available online. I've scanned the ones that aren't or are particularly longer. I want you to be as comfortable as possible. So if you learn better through a physical book, all power to you. Pick up the book. If you don't mind PDF scans and or web links, that's fine too. So again, the 2 texts that you have to buy are the Dark Adventure Radio Theater. Remember that it can just be the single MP3 file and In the Mouth of Madness. That being said, this is the extent of the course. We will be proceeding rather quickly. The only thing that I want you to do before or right on Monday is post to a forum. It's just a basic introduction forum. Tell me who you are. We're going to be working together over these few weeks, and I want to make sure that I have a sense of who you are and your classmates have a sense of who you are. If you're going to be responding to these people in class forums, I want to make sure that you feel comfortable doing so. So with that said, thank you very much. I look forward to working with all of you and wrestling with some Lovecraftian and Eldritch horror. Take care.